Welcome. In this video I'm going to show how I use a one-shot color camera to create Hubble palette images. In this example I've used two different filters. I used a L-Extreme filter which grabs the HA and O3, and I also used a S2 filter. Now the reason we use a separate S2 filter is that HA and S2 are both red. If you're using a filter that picks up the HA and S2 at the same time, you have no way of separating that data because it's all landing on your red pixels. Now I want to also quickly mention that I'm not proposing this as an alternative to using a monochrome camera and standard narrowband filters. This is really intended for either somebody who already has a one-shot color camera and they want to try out doing a Hubble palette. Maybe they already have a dual band filter for their color camera, and also for somebody that's on a very tight budget. So this is an alternative if you're in that situation, but it's definitely not a better way to do it than using a monochrome camera. If you think you're going to be doing a lot of Hubble palette images, I strongly recommend starting to look for a monochrome camera. Okay, so let's get started. Here's the data of the Seagull Nebula with the L-Extreme filter, and here's the S2 data. So first things we want to do is crop and register. So I'll go ahead and crop one of these. I'm going to crop the S2 because it looks like we're just off a little bit. And now I will register the L-Extreme, or align it, I should say, with the S2. Okay, there we go. And we don't need that, so I'll get it out of there. So now, it's really pretty simple. For the S2, we just extract the luminance. And for the L-Extreme, we need to split into the three separate channels. Okay, the red, this is our HA, and it is in fact HA data. The O3 is a greenish blue color. So the data that we have on our green pixels and blue pixels is both O3 data. So we're going to combine these two, and I'm just going to use pixel math to do this. Now, I am using PixInsight, obviously. The concept should be the same regardless of what application you're using to edit your images. As long as you have the ability to split the channels, and I know you can do this in Photoshop, and I'm sure you can do it in other programs, the concept's going to be the same. But PixInsight's what I'm familiar with. Alright, so we'll go to the expression editor, and I'm just going to keep things simple and add them together. I mean, there's all kinds of different formulas that you can use here. You can maybe give more weight to one versus the other, or only use the green and ignore the blue. There's all different kinds of things you can try, but for this video I'm just going to keep it simple. It's just to get the idea across and kind of demo how this is done. And this is certainly not the definitive way of doing it. Alright, so here's our blue plus green image. And I'm going to go ahead and call that 03. Now, there's something else we could do. Normally I would just add them up, but now would not be a bad time to do a dynamic background extraction on these channels. So we're going to do that real quick. Some of this data in particular was captured during a large moon, and so there is a gradient in there. And these dynamic background extraction settings that I'm using I've seen other people use them, and they actually work pretty well. I try to put the squares where there isn't going to be any. You want them just where the background is, so you want to try to avoid as much nebulosity as possible. I mean, I know there's a little bit here. Usually I just do 4 corners, but in this case there's a lot down here, so 3 is the minimum that you need for dynamic background extraction. Now we're going to do a subtraction. So we do a division first and then a subtraction. Just see how it looks. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Alright, so now we're going to do our channel combination. And again, there's especially in PixInsight, there's a number of different ways to do it. I'm just going to use the LRGB combination tool. So our S2 goes into red, our O3 goes into blue, HA goes into green. See what we get. And I mean, there you go. I mean, that's at the core, this is your Hubble palette right here, just like that, using data taken from a one-shot color camera. So I'll continue the processing, but this is the gist of it to get that Hubble palette. It's just taking that dual band filter, the L extreme. You know you're getting your HA with the red pixels. Your O3 is landing on the blue and green, so you just split your L extreme data into the 3 colors, combine blue and green together. That gives you your O3, and your S2 is captured with a separate filter. So I mean, it's inefficient. That S2 light's only hitting 1/4 of your pixels, but it is real S2 light. And here's what you get. So now there's a couple more things we're going to want to do before we apply a stretch to this image. First, I'm going to pull a luminance channel. That way we can do some work with that and add it back. So I'm going to put that aside for a moment. The other thing we need to do is color calibration. So this looks pretty nice actually, but this is just with the auto stretch unlocking the channels. If I lock the channels and hit it, right, it's all green. So we need to get this balanced out preferably while it's in a linear state before stretching. Now, one way to do this is using a tool that's in PixInsight called photometric color calibration. Now, I happen to have one of my original subs here. I believe this is S2. Yeah, unbayered. But the capture software that I use, which happens to be Sequence Generator Pro, puts all the information about this object in the header file. So I can actually get this information from the image file. So I hit acquire from image and it populates. It even gets the pixel size. The focal length is not correct, and you need to enter the focal length for this to work, for the plate saw function to work. So this was with my reduced 70mm SV70T, so 336 millimeters, and we'll go ahead and apply that. And this will take a few minutes. I'll go ahead and stop the video and then start it up when it's finished. Okay, so photometric color calibration just completed. This image looks really weird now, but remember it's the previous stretch, so I got to hit that auto stretch again, and now we're back to a closer version, and these colors are balanced better. It's still not perfect, but this is a good enough state to stretch. One thing real quick, when I applied it, I actually made a mistake. There's a broadband and narrowband option here. I had left it on the broadband option, but previously, just for this doing show palette, that's narrowband, and you want to use the narrowband option. Okay, so this here is actually ready for a stretch, and I'm going to use the Easy Processing Suite Soft Stretch tool. I find it does a pretty good job in most cases for the initial stretch. Alright, so we're finished with that. Now we're going to play with the luminance data that I pulled out. With the luminance data, I'd like to run deconvolution. So the first thing that we need to do is build a PSF image. So we need dynamic PSF, and we need to use small stars that are kind of by themselves, that are not in any nebulosity, and we want to try to get about 20 of them. Now, this is what you want your profile to look like. It's got to be, I'm going to say MOFAT. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, but you don't want any of these Gaussian stars. These won't work. Usually the bigger and brighter ones show up that way. Alright, I think that's good enough for now. I like to sort them by mean absolute difference and just make sure I don't have anything that's too far out. I mean, a lot of times I'll usually toss the low and the high. Then Control A to select all and hit the little camera icon, and there's our PSF. Alright, next up we need a mask, a range selection mask, and a star mask. Now I have to actually stretch this image first to generate those masks. And again, there's a bunch of different ways to get the mask. I'm just doing it these two ways because they're simple and they get the job done. And we're just going to auto stretch. I mean, there are things that you can do to maybe you can play with the histogram to clip the blacks. In this case, you'd want to clip and push in the brights, but honestly, most of the time, this is actually good enough. So we'll start with the star mask. Usually bring the noise threshold up here. That way you're not picking up any noise in your mask. Bump the scale up a little bit. Drop the smoothness down a little bit. There we go. That looks good. And for the range mask, the whole idea behind the range mask is that we really only want the deconvolution to have an impact on the brighter areas. I mean, you can play with the masks. I'm just kind of burning through this pretty quick. Just to give an idea, but you can be really picky with your mask if you want to. Alright, in deconvolution we need to be in a linear state, so I'm going to undo the stretch that I had in there before. And I'm going to go ahead and apply the mask. And we need to invert that mask. And using a preview box makes it easy when you're experimenting with the different deconvolution settings. Okay, so I'm going to hide the mask. Go to external PSF. Drop your PSF in there. I'm going to check D-ringing. Put our star mask in the local D-ringing. I'm changing the noise model. This always looks better, so we'll just go ahead and start there. Now the deconvolution settings are actually very, very sensitive. So I start with a really small setting. Now the thing with deconvolution, don't think of it as sharpening your image. We're not trying to sharpen the image. I mean, it's kind of what we're after, but really you have to look at the stars. It's all about the stars. So you can see the impact that it's had. And it looks like it's not enough. Basically, it's easy to get lost in the deconvolution settings. What I look for is the dark ring around the stars. This is how you know that you need to increase your global dark setting. So usually when I start, I set it really low to find that find where it's showing us the circle, the dark rings. You can see them just barely. And that's where I know that I've hit the bottom of that value. So now I'll move this up a little bit. And we'll try again. So I mean, even though the effect is having a nice impact on the nebulosity, you really want to stay focused on how the stars are looking with this process. Because if you're not careful, you can give your image a very overcooked look, a very artificial look. So this is a little bit better. Some of these larger stars here are going to give us problems, I think. I'm going to raise this again. If you're new to PixInsight, what you're hearing me click on is if you hit the hold Control Shift and Z at the same time, you can cycle back and forth between the changes. So this is with no deconvolution, that's with it. So I mean, this is actually not too bad. Like I said, I think these really bright stars are going to give us some trouble. And we're getting some of the noise, so that is one of the problems, is that it will increase or highlight some of this noise in here. To me, it looks like an orange peel effect. So you can kind of combat that by raising your global bright a little bit, and that's what we'll try. Now the main thing global bright's for is if you have too much, if your global dark value is too high, it's having such a strong effect that it's creating a white circle. So if you see like really weird looking halos around the stars, it could be because your global bright value is too high. So you can see that looks a little bit better. I'm going to raise the global bright up a little bit more. Yeah, I think we're really close. What I'm going to do is stop the video. I'll tweak with it a little bit more until I get it to where I'm satisfied with it, but I think we're close, and for purposes of demoing this step, I think we've got it across. So I'll be right back. Okay, so here's where I ended up with on these deconvolution settings, and I've applied it to the actual image, not just the preview, and so we're ready to move on. Go ahead and remove the mask. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and stretch this. And we'll use the same script. All right, there we go. Okay, so next we're going to want to go ahead and apply this luminance channel to the color data. But before we do that, we have one more thing we have to do. We have to blur out, apply a blur to the color image. So I'll use Atraus wavelet transform, and you just need to disable the layers. There we go, nice and blurry. I promise you it'll look better in a second. Go back to the LRGB combination tool. This time all we have is the luminance. We're going to go ahead and put the luminance on the color. There we go. Alright, so now we want to get rid of this green. There's a lot of green here. And PixInsight has a really nice tool for dealing with green. And this is a very subjective step. A lot of people just obliterate all the green, and we can do that. And that's what it looks like. So now we have more of this light brown, bronzy color with some blues in there. But I actually like a little bit of green left over, so there's a hint of it in there. Once we start playing with curves, you'll see more of it come out. Now we could probably actually go to histogram and stretch this some more, but I'm going to skip that and just start playing with curves. So right away, I usually like to give it a little, do the little traditional S just a little bit to help with some contrast. Not too much though. Maybe brighten the entire image a little bit. Let's start boosting the saturation here. There we go. There's that color that we're talking about. Again, it's all subjective how much you want in there. And maybe there's too much green. If this is too much green, I can always use the SCNR tool again. But you'll notice we're getting this magenta background. And so let's deal with that next. Now, one easy way to get rid of it is to invert this image. Remember that the opposite of green is magenta, and we have the tool, the SCNR tool, that removes green. So we can just simply invert this image and then use that SCNR tool. And again, we can blow away all that green, and that should kill all the magenta. Now sometimes, if there's a lot of magenta and you take it all out, you get left with this weird yellow color. So let's see if we have that in here. And yeah, a little bit. I mean, there's a little bit of it. It's actually not too bad, and it's giving us a nice golden look. It also removed all the magenta from our stars. So, I mean, that's a trick. Even if you're running a mono camera, if you have those magenta stars, which are pretty typical with narrowband images, you can invert the image, put a star mask on, then subtract 100% of the green, take the star mask off, invert back, and now all your magenta stars are gone. And surprisingly, you end up with almost like natural colors in the stars, typically when you do this. Maybe instead of removing all the green, we just move some of it. Leave a little bit back. There. Maybe it's not as harsh as it was before. It's all subjective. Maybe remove a little bit more green here. Too much. I mean, again, my personal taste is I like a little bit of that ghostly green in there, but you know, a lot of people remove it completely from their images. Oops. Let's get the preview back up. I have a habit of closing that preview window. Another tool that I like in that easy processing suite is the star reduction tool. We'll run that real quick. So I mean, this is basically the gist of it, and this is pretty much a full processing run, very quick. So the idea here is not to do a tutorial. I just wanted to demo the theory or the concept behind doing this with a one-shot color camera. So I think after this star reduction, I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to end the video here, but if anyone has any other questions or suggestions, certainly feel free to drop them in the comments. Hope this was interesting. If you look at my Astro Bin, I'll drop the link to Astro Bin in the description. You'll see a lot of pictures that I took using making the Hubble palette with this one-shot color camera, this ASI 533 camera that I'm using. And I don't want to sound like a broken record. This really isn't intended to be a way to do this to replace the procedure with a mono camera. I kind of stumbled across this because my mono camera broke down and I was waiting for a replacement, and I really wanted to do some Hubble palettes after doing just broadband for many months, and I had all the filters, so I thought I'd give it a try, and it works pretty well. So yeah, I think if someone's got a one-shot color camera and they've already got the dual band filter, if they want to play around with this, grab an S2 filter, especially if you're using a camera that's you can get away with a 1 1/4 inch filter. It's not that expensive, and in this case I use an astronomic 6 nanometer, which paired up pretty well with the 7 nanometer of the L-Extreme. And then if you decide to go mono, you've already got your S2 filter. So I'll end it on that. Like I said, if anyone has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, clear skies.